Hello, I'm Emily Hawthorne, a Middle East and North Africa analyst at Stratfor, a RANE company. This podcast is brought to you by Stratfor Worldview, RANE's premier digital publication for objective geopolitical intelligence and analyses. Sign up for the free Stratfor newsletter at worldview.stratfor.com.
You're listening to the Stratfor Essential Geopolitics podcast from RANE. I'm Emily Donahue. Much has been shared about the devastating surge of the coronavirus in India. Hundreds of thousands of people have died, and the simultaneous threats to India's recovery from last year's deep recession could set back development and poverty reduction efforts for years to come. India also faces a complex set of terror threats that are spread out across the country's diverse geography. Here with details is Ben West, Stratfor Senior Global Security Analyst at RANE. Hello, Ben.
Hi, Emily.
India is dealing with a number of insurgencies and terrorist threats. Where are they focused and why are they fighting?
So as you mentioned, the terrorist threat in India is extremely diverse and varies by region. It ranges from ethno-separatist groups in the extreme northeast fighting for greater autonomy, down to the center of the country where Maoist militants known as the Naxalites have been waging one of the longest running insurgencies in the world. And then over into the northwest where one of the most intense theaters is the conflict in Jammu and Kashmir state, where you have the long running dispute between India and Pakistan over control of the Kashmir region, which has initiated not just terrorist attacks, but also military confrontations between the two nuclear powers. And then finally, jihadist groups, while they also exploit the Kashmir conflict, they're active in urban areas throughout the country. And we've seen attacks and arrests and cells broken up everywhere from Delhi in the north to Kerala state in the south. While they haven't had much success over the past 10 years in India, jihadist groups have used India as a base to conduct some pretty large attacks in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan in recent years.
And Ben, what threats do they pose? I mean, especially to foreign companies or expats?
So most of the threats that I just discussed are focused very locally, and their target sets are predominantly security forces and local governments. However, we have seen some indications that companies and maybe even foreign companies could be targeted. So for example, in the Northeast, the Northeastern separatists have kidnapped oil and gas workers. Naxalites in the center have been known to attack commercial interests that they argue aren't beneficial to their local supporters. There are also the threat of extortion, as these terrorist groups rely on extortion to fund their activities. I think Kashmiri militants pose the biggest threat to foreign interest in India, because while few foreign companies actually operate in Kashmir, that conflict carries a pretty significant risk of triggering a broader conflict between India and Pakistan that could cause much larger disruptions to air travel, to supply chains, and obviously security throughout India. Finally, jihadist groups are much more focused on attacking foreign interests, but as I mentioned, security forces have prevented them from carrying out any major attacks in recent years. But still, the grassroots threat from jihadist forces remains, and they continue to target and pose a risk to foreign companies and their personnel.
We started the conversation talking about the current COVID-19 crisis in India. How does that current crisis impact the overall threat from these groups?
So I think it's important to remember that the ultimate goal of any kind of terrorist campaign is to destabilize a host government so that the attackers can promote their own agenda. So the pandemic in general, and especially this current outbreak in India, threaten to achieve that in ways that one-off